Hi there and welcome to another video about multiple sclerosis and my diagnosis and journey with it. I'm going to talk to you today about a further refined diagnosis to the MS I was diagnosed with earlier this year. It's now December 2018 and I received news in November from the NHS neurologist, basing it on my own subjective feedback and the MRI scans that he looked at from my private appointment with a neurologist and with the MRI scan. And he told me I had primary progressive multiple sclerosis. So for those who don't know about the different types of MS, I'll just quickly go through defining each type. Obviously, if you do know about that, then you can skip this part. And if you want to know about my previous history of diagnosis, you can check out my last video, which is here, or there, or maybe even there. I don't know. Anyway, so I was diagnosed, as I said, in November with MS and now have been diagnosed with primary progressive MS. So 85% of MS sufferers have the more common type, which is called relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. So this is, if you were to start, for example, here, where up and down is how severe your symptoms are and across is time. So say you start here. With relapsing remitting MS, you would go along and then maybe relapse into some more severe symptoms of MS. So you go up, and then eventually you'll get over those, and you either return back to where you were originally, or perhaps a little bit worse. So then you might go along a bit further in time, and then relapse, and then go into remission. And there you go. And you keep going through this primary phase, sort of getting relapses and then go back down to normal or slightly worse than you were before. At some stage in your suffering, so it might be 20 years on or whatever, generally when you're older, you go into a secondary, obviously when you're older, the time moves in that direction, you go into a secondary phase, which is called secondary progressive multiple sclerosis. So instead of going through these sort of episodes of relapsing and then remitting, you eventually get to a stage where you just cumulatively get worse, and you accumulate your symptoms and you don't get better from them and then get them again. You have that progression. It sounds normally such a positive word, but in this case it's progressing towards, obviously towards death, but towards further disability and debilitation. I say towards death because we all die, right? So you just keep, progressively getting worse. So that's 85% of people. And what you do is you take drugs to stop or to widen the gap between relapses, right? So it might be, okay, I've relapsed here, and I would normally relapse here, and I'm going to take a drug that will push back my further relapses. Those are called disease-modifying drugs. So they are essentially keeping your MS at bay by delaying going into a relapse. Now, 15% of people with MS have primary progressive MS, which is the type I have. So essentially, you're going to start here, and basically you take on. It's very similar to the secondary phase of primary progressive multiple sclerosis. So you miss out the relapsing remitting, and you merely just get progressively worse over time, and you accumulate these symptoms, and those symptoms themselves stay with you, and they just get progressively worse as you advance through life. Now, with both cases, MS is entirely variable. And so people have very different symptoms and have a very different timescale when it comes to progressing your condition, your condition progressing, or what the symptoms look like under a relapse or whatever. It is such a variable condition. So that's essentially the situation there. I have this 15 within this 15% of sufferers who have this progressive journey that you just get worse and worse. And unfortunately, there are no drugs available, no treatment, medical treatment like that. In the UK, they were hoping to get a drug that is used, I believe, for relapsing remitting patients. Sort of NICE, who are the government group who validate or not different treatments for patients based on the effectiveness they have and the amount of money they cost. Obviously, with the universal healthcare system and taxpayers being responsible for that, they're not going to allow every single treatment under the sun. So they have to have some kind of formula to accept different treatments. And it just so happens that, unfortunately, they've not accepted the drug that can help for, and has been shown to help for, progressive multiple sclerosis sufferers. So that's a real letdown, and perhaps that might get changed in the future. Perhaps newer drugs will come onto the market. Who knows? But at the moment, there is no medical treatment as far as drugs are concerned for PPMS. So that pretty much sucks. So I thought I'd explain that in order that I can tell you what psychologically that means for me, what it means for my family, and what my options are. But first of all, I'll just tell you about my symptoms and where they are at the moment. So in the previous video, I told you about how I have a lack of sensation in my hands. That has got a little bit worse. I have my two fingers on my left hand. I really can't feel, and that goes down my palm. That your sense of touch is so important. You don't realize how important it is until you lose it. There's a song in that somewhere. But you know, I used to fix a lot of things, do a lot of things with my hands, and generally I can't do that anymore. So although I can appear to move them fairly well, although I do have muscle weakness in them as well, so opening jars and things like that is more difficult. I put my hand in my pocket, I can't feel my keys. And it's such a weird thing that you literally, I know my keys are in there, and I know my hand's around my keys, but I just can't feel them. And that's such an odd thing. And obviously, when you're using screwdrivers or this and that, it becomes particularly difficult. It's Christmas time now, and I got the post the other day. There's heaps of post at the moment, and I got in from work, and I dropped the first 5 things, pieces of post that I picked up. So you drop a lot of things and you end up having to look. So when I'm using a TV controller, I have to look. Normally, you just use it by feel, and you'd be looking at the TV and feeling the buttons in order to press, and now I have to look at which button to press, and I often get it wrong. So you do things by sight and not by feel, so you end up looking at your hands an awful lot more. It's just one of those things, right? So the sensation on my body is I think deteriorating a bit. My legs and feet and sort of forearms, and the touch of my skin isn't so good. The coordination of my walking is not very good. I walked my boys to school this morning, about a 10-minute walk, and that was pretty much fine. I'll weave a little bit. If I look at my phone, I weave a lot. But that's fine. But the walk back was a little more challenging. When I get back home, then that's me. Whew, I'm pretty done, and I'm definitely staggering a lot more. That's why you can get these T-shirts saying, I'm not drunk, I've got MS type thing, because you can look a bit drunk, right? So I think the distance that I can travel without feeling it has shortened. So muscle weakness is something that is a problem. I'm not as fatigued as I was in the summer, because I think that I've changed my diet hugely. So I'm a vegan, I'm pescatarian, which means I eat fish, but have essentially gone vegan, so no dairy and whatnot. And actually, I think my guess is that has improved my fatigue levels. I do obviously get tired going through the day and at night, and I'm a teacher, so by the end of the day I am done. So I say fatigue it's not as bad as it was, but I still have it. I still have low levels of energy, which is challenging when you're used to doing so much. I used to manage a football team and help coach a rugby team. I obviously can't do that anymore, so I don't do that. So it's about stripping my life back in order to have a manageable lifestyle. I still need to wee an awful lot, so that's a big thing. I need to get to the toilet quickly. You know, when I can feel it coming, I've got to get to that toilet quickly, and that's just part of what the condition is. Cognitively, I think I'm subpar, and that is challenging for me personally, because I am an author, a philosopher, a teacher, author, philosopher, blogger, and public speaker, and so I use my cognitive faculties an awful lot, and to not be able to use them to the degree I used to be able to it really annoys me, and it's a big shame that. So, you know, short-term memory, focus, word selection, things like that are just not quite as good as they used to be. I used to be able to read philosophical papers, to be able to write about them and stuff like that. I just really struggle with that nowadays. So yeah, physically I am feeling it more and more, and mentally as well. Mentally I've probably kept a fairly level playing field, but it is a worry going forward, because obviously this condition is progressive, and what's a weird thing psychologically is that you know that this is the best you'll ever be. Right now is the best my mind will ever be, and the best my body will ever be. It is all downhill from here on in. It's rather like, I suppose, when you get really old and you start to deteriorate, you just think, goodness me, this is just a downhill journey now, towards death. And that's the same for someone with PPMS, which is I will progressively get worse both physically and mentally. And so right now, this moment now is the best I'll ever be for the rest of my life, to a large degree, and that's quite a challenge, especially when as I say, I do so much, and I want to do so much, and I still have these aspirations, and I still have these aims and desires. I've still got a number of books I want to write, and you're wondering, actually, will I be able to do that? And that's quite. I don't get depressed about it, because I'm quite a rational person. It just really annoys me. You know, God damn it, I want to do these things and I won't be able to do them, and that frustrates the bejesus out of me. And then obviously there are things like parenting my twin boys who are presently 8, and I'm just thinking I can't run around and kick a football with them. It's certainly in a way I used to be able to, and going forward, you know, when they're a couple of years down the line, you know, where am I going to be? How's that going to, you know, what physically, how am I going to feel? And then the big one is my partner, and I'll have to go and pick up my boys now from school, but I'll finish the video and continue telling you about my journey then. So I'm back now, and I was going to talk about how my condition affects presently and will affect my partner. And that is something that worries me a lot, because at the end of the day, my partner didn't sign up for this really. So what she is experiencing now and what she will experience going forward with my deterioration in health is not something that she bought into in this relationship, sort of certainly 11 years ago when it started. So I think I feel a big sense of guilt when it comes to how she is going to be affected, and how my boys are going to be affected, and the family at large, the extended family, and the amount of extra help and care they're going to have to put in. Because, you know, I know that my partner's looked around at people that she has seen with PPMS, and she's seen how debilitated they are and wheelchair bound and having to have full-time carers, and she's thinking, you know, this is a big ask, and I'm not sure that that's something I can, you know, something I want to do, I can imagine. And you know, at the end of the day, I no doubt at some point will need full-time carers. I will need my personal hygiene sorted and things like that, and we will be restricted in what we can do, you know, talk about holidays and this and that, and financially how we're going to be affected. There are huge ramifications to our collective lives that come about due to primary progressive multiple sclerosis, and I obviously feel culpable for any kind of feeling that she has. So psychologically, there is a drain, obviously, on myself, but I'm not too worried about that as much as actually for my partner and for my boys, and for the lack of ability to be an effective partner myself and an effective father and family member. So I think those are some really big challenges for me and those close to me. As far as treatment goes, there is one option that is available to me, and that is something called HSCT. So what is HSCT? Well, it stands for, and I don't know if I got this right, but hematopoietic stem cell transplantation. What that basically means is your control of deleting your immune system. So they harvest your stem cells from your blood or your bone marrow, I think, and then they give you aggressive chemotherapy, which basically kills your immune system off. So there are it's not risk-free. I mean, it's quite risky because at the end of the day, you will be prone to all sorts of infections because you will have no immune system for some time while you recover. And they reboot your immune system with your stem cells. So it really is a case of turning your immune system off and then back on again in order to get it working. So, and the idea is that you maintain your physical and mental health at the point that you are at, so you don't have any further progression. Now, some people in some instances make some health recovery in terms of MS, so they do regain some abilities and capacities that they had previously lost, but this is quite rare, so there's no guarantee for that. So it really is about maintaining where you're at. You can get it on the NHS in Britain, but only in London. I think they used to do, I'm not sure they still do, some work on it in Sheffield, but I don't know that that's available. So basically London, you can get it in London, Charing Cross, and in Britain you can change your consultants, you can change your GP. If I wanted, I could go and select my GP to be up in the Shetland Islands. Obviously that's not very useful for me because I live in the south of England, and so that would be ridiculous, but I could do that. So you have the ability to choose your neurologist and your consultant. So I would need to change my consultant up to London, to the particular consultants who do it, and then jump through some hoops and qualify in order to get HSCT. The other option for getting it on the NHS, because there's no guarantee, in fact it's probably unlikely I'll be able to get it on the NHS, is to get it done privately. So you can pay £60,000 to get it done at that same place in London, or you can go to Moscow or Mexico or these other places. I know Moscow are one of the best in the world for doing it, and you get inpatient provisions, so they look after you in the hospital and you can stay there for 3 weeks, rather than you get kicked out of hospital in other places and you have to get carers to look after you. So that's great in Moscow, and that costs about £40,000. With Brexit and the fluctuation of the pound at the moment, you know, this can have some bigger ramifications as to how affordable these treatments are. So I'm looking very much to get HSCT either on the NHS, but failing that, I'd have to do some fundraising and get it in Moscow. And that, you know, is a big expense. And although it has really, I'm asking my children to be quiet as they're playing computer games next door very noisily. So the challenge there is that if you're doing fundraising, you're saying to people, please be kind and generous and donate to my health, you know, the treatment for my MS. Thank you very much, and you collect a bunch of money in, and then you do this, and even though it's got very high success rates of something like 70-80%, if you're in the 20-30%, where it doesn't work, then you've asked all these people to donate generously to you spending £40,000 on effectively nothing of a treatment that doesn't work, and that's a real risk, and that will be something to deal with. But you know, obviously everyone enters the treatment hoping that they're going to be successful. The treatment will be successful for them. I am hoping to get that done because really that's the only kind of treatment option available to me. I am presently a pescatarian, so when I suspected I had MS before my first diagnosis, I bought a book on a recommendation of someone else, a book called Overcoming MS, and this is by an Australian doctor who got MS some time ago and decided to assimilate all the research he could on MS and what worked and what didn't work, and he came up with the sort of 7 things that you can do, one of which is diet, another being supplements, so vitamin D, omega-3, all these kind of things. So I took that on board and I became pescatarian, so vegan, but I eat fish, and I take all these supplements, and I believe since doing that my fatigue levels have massively improved. Now I still get tired at the end of the day from teaching and from existing, and you know, that tiredness is far greater than it was before I started developing MS. But over the last sort of, I'd say 4 or 5 months, I think my fatigue levels have improved, and I would probably put that down to my diet. I'm really happy with my diet. I mean, I've always wanted to be vegetarian and possibly vegan, you know, as the extra step. Ethically, I think it's a far superior position. As a philosopher, I've looked into this, and what's been holding me back is just the simple fact that I'm morally imperfect, right? I'm just not as good as I could be, and my desire to eat meat has been greater than my desire to be a good person. So now I've been forced to become a vegan. Actually, I'm really enjoying it. The food that we're having, it's so easy to be vegan these days. So the food that we're having is really good. The substitutes are absolutely fine, apart from maybe cheese. But the substitutes for milk are absolutely fine. And do you know what? I'm healthier than I've been. I've lost loads of weight, and I think it's been really beneficial. What would be really interesting to see where I would be had I not become vegan. So what stage of MS, or what kind of amount of progression of MS would I have had I not become vegan? I'd love to be able to compare that. But my hope is, my belief is that it has had a positive impact on my health from an MS point of view, as well as just from a normal health point of view. My body is healthier, definitely, than it was. So that's one thing I've done, and hopefully that will be slowing down any future progression, and it's about keeping to that. You know, it doesn't matter if occasionally you let slip, you know, because actually, as far as the meat's concerned, it's not the way I understand a diet is it's not the meat per se that is not healthy for you. It's the fact that meat is higher in saturated fats, and really it's saturated fats that are important for you know, your MS health. So the higher your saturated fat intake, the more chance you have of inflammation, and it is an inflammation condition as well as an autoimmune condition. So the vegan aspect to the diet is about keeping your saturated fat levels down, and therefore your symptoms to some extent at bay. So I will, you know, if I slip up here and there, it's not going to be the death of me, right? So there is some margin for error, but a bit like if you're an alcoholic, you don't want to start, oh, I just have a drink here and a drink there, because you'll just get back on the wagon. So the same with saying, oh, I'll have a burger here and that there, and then before you know it, your saturated fat levels are going right back up, and then you know you're not doing yourself a favour. So I'm really happy with where I'm at with that, and I think I can sustain that going forward. The milk stuff is quite interesting, because the reason why they suggest not having milk products is that milk protein is very similar to the myelin sheath protein, and they're not 100% sure, so this isn't definite, but they think that if you take in dairy, this is the way I understand it, it could be wrong, your body then will start attacking it and start attacking your myelin sheath in that kind of autoimmune attack the body way. So don't have milk proteins because they're too similar to myelin sheath proteins, and hopefully it means your body won't attack the myelin sheath around your nerves. So actually that's the one thing that I'm saying to myself, I'm not going to have any dairy in case that is the case. Whereas if I have the odd bit of meat here and there, although I'm morally inferior to my former self, you know, it's not going to affect me as much as possibly having a slip up with milk. So I'm being stricter on the milk side than I am the meat side. But anyway, you know, each their own. I've met so many people with MS that have different approaches to diet and different approaches, you know, the paleo diet, the Dietary, whatever. That's what I'm doing, and I think it's working pretty well. And people get so defensive about diets, you know, because especially if there's a moral dimension to it. Because if I walk up to someone and say, "Hey, I'm a vegan," what they and they're not, how they interpret that is, you're saying that you're morally better than me, which is by inference and implication, I am morally worse. I can't believe I'm morally bad, and so therefore I have to reject that. And that's why there's such a vehement rejection of veganism for so many people, because actually it's a moral statement to say that this person says, I'm a vegan, I'm morally good or morally better, therefore you're morally worse. And it's that person dealing with the claim or the implication that they are morally worse. And so that, yeah, people reject veganism quite vehemently. But I'm not really bothered about it. I'm just doing what I think is better for my health, and I think that is better for my health. So that's the situation. You know, there are many more physical symptoms that I probably haven't talked about. For example, another one I get is I get this feeling like, do you know the deep heat cream, Ralgex, you know, the cream that you put on, you know, in the rugby changing rooms or before a football game or whatever, before playing sport, to warm up your muscles, and it's got that kind of burning feeling, icy burning feeling. Well, I get that sometimes, right, as if it's been smeared across my face, and I get that sort of tingling, and it's just like deep heat smeared across my face, and then my brain will sort of tingle a bit. And I'll kind of lose focus. And I get it a lot when I'm reading out loud. So if I'm in class reading to the children in my class, for some reason the intensity of reading to them, and I've had it with the boys, reading to the boys as well, it makes it happen. But it basically happens at, it seems to be times when I'm putting quite a lot of cognitive effort into something. And that happens, and I wonder, whoa, is that actual permanent damage that is happening there and then, or is it just a thing to do with heat sensation of skin and stuff? But that's something that definitely happens, and you kind of have to stop what you're doing almost, because it's kind of, it takes over the sensation of your face and your mind and whatnot. But I can't think of many other debilitations other than that general sense that my body, you know, when I walk, I'm slightly more stooped, and I have to think, let's put my back up and walk properly and slow down. I think when I stagger more when I just don't think to, right, slow down, take it easy, walk sensibly and straight. And when I do that, and when I just hang on, mate, just calm down a bit, that's when I walk better. When you just let your automatic brain take over and you're thinking all these things, and then you go on your journey or you do whatever you're doing, that's when the body goes, whoa, I'm not too happy about that, and staggers around a bit. When I'm sitting down on my knees or with my legs under me or something on the floor, maybe I'm playing with the boys or on a PlayStation or whatever, or wrapping presents or whatever. If I'm there for a long time and then get up, it's really difficult to get up, and then one of my legs often just suddenly goes. I'm like, whoa, and it's those little things that are just happening more and more, and you look at the extrapolation of that progression, and you hope, you know, even though it's only been a bit over the last 2 or 3 months, you think, okay, that's only a little bit, but then if I extrapolate that over 2 or 3 years, actually that percentage-wise, that's a potentially a big deterioration I'm facing quite quickly, and that's kind of worrying. But the hope is that actually, you know what, could I be one of the people that can last 20 years without too much progression? Who knows? It's such a variable disease condition. So that's where I'm at. The options for PPMS aren't great, but HSCT seems to be the only viable option. It's just got massive cost implications if I can't get it on the NHS. So at some point there might be a fundraising video say, please give me some pennies. But if not, there'll be general updates on health and dealing with MS, you know, from a psychological point of view, I suppose. Anyway, thank you for watching, if indeed you have. If you turned off halfway through, then obviously you're not hearing this, so whatever. Until next time, cheers.